Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet. I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism.
With sharp humor and his usual sarcasm, Bill Maher turns his attention toward Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, breaking down how their bold political moves often end up backfiring instead of helping them. Using jokes, examples, and blunt honesty, Maher explains why their strategies sound exciting at first, but don't always work in the real world, especially when it comes time to win over voters.
James Carville knew how to win, and he blamed the Democratic losses this November 2nd on stupid wokeness, to which AOC fired back that wokeness is a term almost exclusively used by older people these days. So that should tell you all you need to know. What? This is a term folks like you brought out very recently and had been proudly displaying at every march since. Just last year, The Guardian declared woke the word of our era. Guess they didn't get the memo from the Mean Girls Club. We don't use that emoji anymore. Woke, please, we say fetch.
Bernie Sanders is still holding on to his dreams of reaching the White House, while AOC keeps being unclear about her future plans, leaving the door open for a possible run. Even so, their political momentum never seems to fully take off. This is where Bill Maher steps in and lays it all out, explaining exactly why their usual game plan keeps falling apart. As always, don't forget to smash that subscribe button, and let's jump right into it.
Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week.
Bill Maher argues that Bernie Sanders struggles because his big ideas don't turn into broad support from voters. Even though Bernie doesn't like being called a socialist, Maher points out that many people still see his plans that way. From high taxes on the super rich to his long push for single-payer healthcare, Maher says these ideas may be popular with progressives, but often clash with what most voters want. He brings up real examples from Vermont, where Sanders tried to introduce single-payer healthcare, but the plan ran into serious problems and never delivered the big results that were promised. Maher sees this as a warning sign. He believes Sanders' approach sounds great on paper, but keeps failing in real life, especially when voters start worrying about too much government control. The message is clear: big speeches alone don't win elections. Voters want practical ideas, clear plans, trust, real results, and good timing.
I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism.
Maher also says another big reason Bernie Sanders and AOC are losing steam is the Democratic Socialist label itself. He believes this label pushes them away from mainstream Democrats in the eyes of many voters. While most Democrats support change within a capitalist system, Maher explains that Democratic Socialists are often seen as wanting much more government control over the economy. That difference matters because for many Americans, the word socialism still raises fears about government overreach and unstable finances. Even when Sanders and AOC try to soften their ideas, Maher says the label alone makes moderate voters nervous. In his view, the label fires up their progressive base, but limits their appeal and hurts their chances in national elections.
The DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more. You think you're going to win an election on that? It just seems like more extremism at a time when Americans are begging both parties, please, could just one of you act normal.
Maher says fear is a major reason why many Americans remain doubtful of democratic socialists. There's a fear that if they ever gain real power, existing problems could grow even worse. People are already frustrated with issues like immigration, rising costs, and increased government spending. Maher points out that when voters watch debates about border policies under President Biden, some worry that democratic socialist leadership would mean even stronger government involvement. The takeaway is simple. Voters may criticize Biden, but when they compare him to what democratic socialists might do, he suddenly seems like the safer choice. Maher uses this comparison to explain why Bernie Sanders and AOC struggle to win over people beyond their progressive supporters. It's not hatred toward their ideas, he says, but fear of the ripple effects their big reforms could cause across the country.
It's either defund the police or military in the streets. Either MAGA's crypto crony capitalism or city-run grocery stores. No, I don't want that. I want a Democrat who reassures me if you like your Whole Foods, you can keep your Whole Foods.
Maher makes his position very clear. He supports capitalism, which he believes allows people to control their own lives, make choices freely, and deal with the outcomes of those choices. He argues that capitalism encourages creativity, rewards hard work, and promotes personal responsibility, giving people the chance to build their futures without heavy government control. This belief, he says, connects with many Americans and sits at the heart of the American dream. The idea that anyone can succeed no matter where they start through effort, creativity, and determination. From Maher's point of view, socialism threatens that dream by putting too much power in too few hands, limiting opportunity, and reducing motivation. By defending capitalism, Maher believes he is defending freedom, responsibility, and the right for each person to shape their own life.
Governor-elect Spanberger once said about Biden's presidency that, quote, nobody elected him to be FDR. They elected him to be normal. Normal! You know, at this year's DSA convention, or as it's commonly known, Comic-Con, get this, you had to submit a photo of a negative COVID test to get in. In 2025. Yeah, no one wants to do that again. We've had enough of Trump's macho and also enough of politics.
Here, Maher criticizes Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for what he sees as weak leadership and relying too much on activist pressure. He focuses on moments when they choose to follow activist energy instead of guiding it. He mentions their appearances at large Fight the Oligarchy rallies, where huge crowds gather to attack corporate power and promote left-wing ideas. Maher notes that Sanders and AOC often repeat crowd chants instead of delivering messages that could reach people outside their base. In another example, far-left activists at a rally accused them of not going far enough on the Israel-Palestine issue, forcing both politicians to react instead of clearly stating their own positions. Maher argues that by blending in with loud activist voices instead of leading, they lose moderate voters and make it harder to connect with everyday Americans.
These democratic socialists at another of their conventions, they were told to make jazz hands instead of clapping, lest some delegates suffer sensory overload. And also, and I'm not joking, they were told not to be wearing, any aggressive scents.
Please don't go into that space with anything that's like an aggressive scent, for instance, right? Because that's going to be difficult for people.
Oh, for sake.
Maher says this kind of activist language is exactly what he expected Bernie Sanders and AOC to push back against, but instead, they seem to accept it. He points to some extreme activist behavior, including the infamous moment at a conference where people were told to clap in a specific way to avoid sensory overload. Maher questions how clapping could possibly be overwhelming and why no one is allowed to challenge such rules. He also wonders whether everyone truly agreed with these strange practices or if many people were silently uncomfortable. In Maher's view, leaders like Bernie and AOC should set limits and guide their supporters, not blindly accept every new activist trend. When they fail to do that, he believes they push away moderate voters who see this behavior as strange, performative, and too extreme.
This is who the Democrats are thinking of following. Chuck Schumer ain't perfect, but at least he doesn't crumple into a heap when confronted with Chanel No. 5. You may now clap in the traditional way. Thank you very much.
This moment stands out because Maher, who often criticizes Chuck Schumer, actually gives him credit here. The reason highlights deep divisions within the Democratic Party. Maher says Schumer at least stands his ground on certain issues instead of giving in to every wave of woke activism. One key example is Schumer's strong stance against rising anti-Semitism on the left. As Senate Minority Leader, Schumer gave speeches and made public statements condemning slogans like "from the river to the sea," which he believed crossed the line from protest into dangerous rhetoric. By taking this position, Schumer separated himself from activist movements that downplay these concerns, showing he's willing to push back when he thinks things go too far.
Why is the party that supports so many issues that benefit the middle class still considered out of touch by 62% of Americans? In plain English, nobody likes a snob. Hillary Clinton didn't have anyone on rural research or outreach when she ran in 2016 until the race tightened just before the election. Then they hired one. And where was his office? Brooklyn. True story. Politics is local, not locally sourced. It's not artisan. It's art and stand.
Maher argues that beyond constantly giving in to activists, Democratic leaders have become disconnected from everyday Americans. Instead of focusing on real issues like inflation, healthcare, and public safety, he says the party is too focused on pleasing the loudest progressive voices. This obsession, according to Maher, comes at a serious cost. It pushes away moderates and leaves many voters feeling ignored and frustrated. He points out that chasing activist trends and virtue signaling often leads to dramatic speeches rather than real solutions. In Maher's opinion, by choosing ideology over practical problem solving, Democrats risk losing touch with the voters they claim to represent. The result is weaker election chances and a failure to truly help the public.
James Carville knew how to win, and he blamed the Democratic losses this November 2nd on stupid wokeness, to which AOC fired back that wokeness is a term almost exclusively used by older people these days. So that should tell you all you need to know. What? This is a term folks like you brought out very recently and had been proudly displaying at every march since. Just last year, The Guardian declared woke the word of our era. I guess they didn't get the memo from the Mean Girls Club. We don't use that emoji anymore. Woke, please, we say fetch now.
Maher also finds it interesting that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is now trying to distance herself from the word woke, even though it has been a constant theme in her rallies and public appearances. While she may say she doesn't like the label, many of her actions have made critics see her as closely tied to the woke movement. From strongly supporting progressive policies to backing activist-led causes, her public image often matches what people associate with the woke left. Maher argues that AOC regularly leans into activist politics, pointing to her use of symbolic gestures, activist demands, and identity-focused messaging. He believes that rejecting the label while continuing the behavior only highlights the gap between what she says and how she acts. Whether she accepts the term or not, Maher says her political identity is now deeply connected to progressive activism. In the end, he believes her actions speak louder than words, keeping her firmly linked to the woke movement. That brings today's video to a close. If you liked it, hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.